You ever see those students who just seem to get it, like almost instantly? Meanwhile, you're stuck rereading the same page for the 10th time. Well, here's the secret. It's not about studying harder. It's about being a smarter questioner. And in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly how asking the right questions can totally supercharge your learning. So I got to ask you, are you studying hard or are you studying smart? Because really, that's the difference between feeling frustrated and that amazing feeling of rapid, deep understanding. And today, you're going to get the tools to make sure you're always on the smart side of that equation. This right here, this is the whole idea in a nutshell. The best students, the ones who really crush it, they don't just have the best answers memorized. Nope, they have the best questions. Just shifting your focus to this one idea is what separates the people who passively absorb information from the ones who truly master it. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to pinpoint the enemy, those passive questions that are secretly holding you back. Then we'll start climbing what I call the question ladder to make our questions way more powerful. I'm going to give you a secret weapon, a framework called specific. And finally, we'll see how to put it all into practice. Okay, let's dive right in. To really get what makes a good question, we first have to talk about what makes a bad one. And honestly, most of us fall into the trap of asking these passive, unhelpful questions all the time without even knowing it. Do any of these ring a bell? I just don't get this. Can you explain all of chapter 5? Or, the classic, is this going to be on the exam? Yeah, we've all been there. The problem is, they're just not very good questions. And here's why. All of these are what you call passive questions. They're lazy. They put the entire job of thinking on someone else, your teacher, your friend, whoever. You're basically outsourcing your own brain work. And that just leads to passive learning, where you're just a bucket for information instead of actively building your own understanding. So how do we fix this? It's all about transforming our questions. We're going to climb something called the question ladder, and it's going to take us from those weak, surface-level questions to ones that are genuinely powerful. Think of it like leveling up in a video game, right? Level 1 is just basic factual recall, simple stuff. At level 2, you start to get comprehension, asking how and why. Then at level 3, you're in application mode. You're actually using what you know. But the final boss, that's level 4, analytical. This is where you challenge the ideas themselves and see how everything fits together. And look at the difference here. It's night and day. A level 1 question is like, when did World War I start? Simple fact, easy lookup. A level 4 question, though, is on another planet. To what extent is the alliance system argument an example of structural determinism? Whoa, that's basically asking, was the war inevitable because of how the system was set up? One's a fact, the other is a whole debate. And here it is, the secret that A+ students live by. Thinking at level 4 isn't just for fun. This is exactly what gets you the top marks. Examiners are looking for this kind of deep, analytical thinking. Nailing this is your key to the best grades, period. Okay, so you know what a great question looks like, but how do you actually come up with one on the spot? Well, this is where your new secret weapon comes into play. It's a framework called specific. Think of specific as your checklist before you ask for help. S, state what you do understand. P, pinpoint the exact spot where you get lost. E, give an example of your confusion. C, provide the context. I, what's your ideal outcome? F, what's your first crack at an answer? Then, what's the impact of this confusion? And finally, C, try to make a connection to the bigger picture. It seems like a lot, but it forces you to do the thinking before you ask. And here's what that looks like in the real world. Instead of saying, I'm confused about enzymes, you get this beautiful question. It shows what you know, it pinpoints the problem with bonds, and it even offers up a guess. A teacher sees this, and bam, they can give you the perfect, laser-focused answer in like 30 seconds. All right, theory's great, we've got this awesome framework, but a tool is useless if it just sits in the toolbox. So let's talk about putting these questions to work in real life. And this is for everywhere, not just for bugging your teacher. In class, ask how this new thing connects to what you learned last week. Studying by yourself, challenge yourself. Can I explain this out loud without looking at my notes? In a study group, compare answers and figure out why they're different. Even with AI, don't just ask for a summary. Tell it where you're confused. So, using the right question for the right situation is key. But let's be honest, when it's crunch time, when exams are looming, we can get even smarter by focusing on the questions that have the biggest, most direct impact on our final grade. Which brings us to it. The single, most powerful, most high leverage question you can possibly ask when you're studying for a big test. And here it is. What does the mark scheme actually want here? This is a total game changer. Why? Because it makes you stop thinking like a student who's just trying to remember stuff and start thinking like an examiner who's looking for specific keywords and ideas to give points for. You stop just trying to be right and start delivering exactly what gets you the score. And here are a few more heavy hitters. Ask about the difference between a good answer and a great one. Don't just look at the right answer, figure out precisely why yours was wrong. Force yourself to connect topics from different parts of the course. And, my favorite, pretend you have to teach it. That will ruthlessly expose every single one of your weak spots. Asking these kinds of questions about mark schemes, about your own mistakes, it's all part of a much bigger skill. It's really the final level of learning. It's called metacognition. It means thinking about your thinking. It's the ability to zoom out and ask questions about your own learning process, to become the manager of your own brain. And the payoff for developing this skill is just huge. Metacognitive learners are on a different level. They're constantly asking themselves, is this study method actually working for me? Or do I just recognize this, or can I truly explain it from scratch? By actively managing their own learning, they aren't just putting in hours, they're making those hours count. And the result? They don't just learn better, studies show they can learn up to 3 times faster. So, we'll leave you with that. You've got the tools, you have the frameworks, you have everything you need to change the way you learn starting right now. So the only real question left is, what's the first question you're going to ask about your own learning?